So we are continuing where Iqbal has tried to see notions of time, the mathematical time in that sense, and the serial time of Kant in these passages. But he has developed a whole section, whole 1 2 paragraphs on Opensky, one of the writers, maybe Russian writers, who was trying to make some sense vis-a-vis the the developments in the geometry and the perceptual aspects of things, how as human consciousness perceives events in the wake of the revised definition of time and maybe developments in geometry. So maybe if I'll quote this Opensky in Teritum Organum, where he is very much appreciative of Kant. He tries to say Kant established that everything is perceived by senses and perceived in time and space, and outside time and space we can perceive nothing. So the existence of space and time, human existence or human perception is contingent on the conditionalities of space and time, which are external to it. And further he says what we must answer the question, what is time? And time is the greatest riddle which confronts mankind, and Kant regards time in the same way as space, as purely subjective. How can world exist if it does not exist in past, present and future? Anything only exists in the present, the eternal now of Indian philosophy. Maybe the way, if you read first 6, 7, 8 chapters of this Opensky's book, so you come to the fact that Opensky is trying to contextualize the developments in non-Euclidean geometry. If, for example, if you are in a point, you can localize point in a space. You can localize line in a plane. You can localize a plane in some 2-dimensional surface, or 2-dimensional surface in a 3-dimensional surface, or a 3-dimensional surface in some higher dimensional surface. The only novelty which Opensky is trying to say is that time as a dimension can be perpendicular to it. So maybe Iqbal is trying to, maybe he is not convinced by Opensky's way of just trying to see things in trying to say that Opensky somehow tries to defend a certain serial character of time in that sense, and which is which has past, present and future. But how can it be rescued in the sense, the way we define relativity and we define these notions of simultaneity? For example, in the last sentence, if this character is in reality and illusion, how can it fulfill Opensky's requirement of an original dimension? Time as a dimension which is perpendicular to the space dimension. Maybe the role of Opensky can be more seen in that how he perceptually sees space and time with vis-a-vis the developments in the understanding of higher dimensional space, and how we can embed a lower dimensional space in a higher dimensional space. And there can be very speculative argumentation can be inferred from that, how we can have a perceptual space in that sense. So whether that theology can be extracted or exacted from it, maybe Iqbal is not also totally convinced of the argumentation of Opensky. All said and done, we are again going to just revisit this higher dimensional spaces, or more than Euclidean 3-dimensional spaces, or n-dimensional spaces remain. So how these all spaces or non-Euclidean spaces, how we can see it vis-a-vis the developments in the way we study things in general theory of relativity or special theory of relativity, and maybe contextualize Iqbal's discomfort that the how we can fundamentally perceive time in that cosmic sense, time in the sense where we can place events in that sense. So the positivistic, the empiricist understanding of space and time, or uh, empricized geometry, in which we embed a general theory of relativity as a theory. So we have to see it that way, and we'll see. So for example, so in the history of general theory of relativity is said that Herman Weyl and Arthur Eddington, maybe Herman Weyl has been a significantly how he interpreted general theory of relativity more as an empirical, on an empirical basis. Maybe Eddington took argumentation from him. So for example, Wheel's understanding of general theory of relativity, or more generally physical phenomena, and had direct influence on Eddington. And what's important that the present for physicists, for GTR, as a physical theory, as a kind of a theory which physics could be have correspondence, the way we had a Newtonian theory of gravity, which has an empirical grounding. So for example, if we'll quote Russell, whereas Eddington seems to regard it necessary to adopt Einstein's variable space, Whitehead regards it as necessary to reject it. For my part, I do not see why we should agree to either view. The matter seems to be one of convenience of interpretation of formula. So the results of relativity, the form-like understanding of relativity, is for Russell more important than from the prior principles, where even Einstein and Whitehead may disagree in that sense. So you can say so you can see the disagreement can not only be from the metaphysical, but you can also see the methodological point of view as a theory of space-time structure, which you can see. So in that context, you can say that. So you have to come to the empirical theory of physical geometry, where you can say Kant can take it as a radical empiricism or a positivists. So you can say traditional metaphysics failed to see empirical world itself in only framework with which such questions can be meaningfully posed. So what is the invocation? So the novelty of Einstein was that Einstein's definition of simultaneity is an attempt to articulate the concept of simultaneity that reveals its empirical meaning, means the subjectivity of an observer, which is related to his unique position in space. It can be measured in an empirical way. So you can quantify events, or you can quantify measurements in an empirical sense, vis-a-vis the land, whatever. You can see the physical changes, you can see. And in the end, while once we correct the Galilean law with that the correction law, Galilean with that factor of 1 minus v square by c square, you can come up to the no need for absolute frame of reference in that sense. So Reichenbach, so maybe you can, in this position, you can say that Reichenbach is a qualified empiricist. So in the relativization of geometry, whether we go from one geometry to another geometry, Euclidean to non-Euclidean, or you can have variants of non-Euclidean geometries which can be equally consistent. And the point is, so for example, how we can have for example, relativity of geometry to emphasize the dependence of geometry on the dependence of congruence. For example, if you go to Reichenbach's book, if you go to his book Philosophy of Space and Time, you can see famously this sort of diagram is there, that you see you have like this. So you have For example, if a person is moving on this and you suddenly observe a sort of curved surface, so the point is that P and Q, this is uh, P prime, Q prime, P and Q, this is A, B and C, this is, and this is A, B, C. So this is PQ, PQ. So if somebody is on this line and you have a curved space, and somebody moves on this flat space, the point is for observers which are moving on a curved space, how they are going to measure, for example, this length interval, this length interval. So for these, for a person on this space, he might find AB is going to BC. But for observers seeing from an Euclidean perspective, a flat space, they might not observe the equivalence of length AB being equivalent to BC. Or the people who are observing from this to this, they may not see them to be equal. So this relative metrization, so how the measurements of two people, for example, if they have the shadow of this on this side, or so they may not, the lengths may not necessarily come out to be same when seen from two geometrical perspective, embeddings of two geometries, the measurements from two geometries. So this is to sort of give an illustrative thing how we can see. So we can say that empiricist commitment, which it determines the philosophical position of Einstein, mainly joined by the trends. So Einstein was not new or unique as it is seen in that sense. He was basically carrying the trend of Kirchhoff, Hertz, Maxwell, and maybe earlier Ockman's principle, or Euler's, what I should say, trying to find the Leibnizian metaphysics and Newtonian perspective and emphasizing the things, and Kant's way of doing this, emphasizing the entire Newtonian thing with the Euclidean geometry. You can see these attempts vis-a-vis those attempts. But the only point is that how positivists like Reichenbach and Schlick, and to a lesser extent Carnap, noted that the post-Kantian developments in mathematics, how we can see these post-Kantian developments in mathematics and physics show that anything is Euclidean, or rather far from it. Maybe there is more than Euclidean world is a small world. So world can be, there are many non-Euclidean, many worlds, equally consistent worlds, geometrical worlds, which are non-Euclidean or Euclidean. So Euclidean geometry is very small subset. And echoing that, Reichenbach says that Kant's table of categories appears to promote primitive in comparison to the modern theory of invariance, or modern theory of transformation theory, in that sense, where you can go from one manifold to some another manifold, and trying to see how to have invariance, how to develop that homeomorphic maps or congruence relations, and the notions of absolute rest, absolute velocity, and absolute simultaneity are no longer invariant or objective. They are now conventional or factual. Conventional in the Poincarian sense, that's it. So one geometry cannot be more true than another. So it can only be more convenient. So what we can say, so it is not that, so the question is is it right to say that this empiricism as a philosophy, following Einstein being one of the followers, or these, so it gave rise to a relativity in that sense, or it's the other way around in that sense. So it can be open-ended. So you can say these, so you can have to differentiate between empiricist transcend empiricist philosophy in that sense. So here because it led to the more Catholic way of looking at. One is radical empiricism of Hume, or you can say Kant's also, but you can also say where it led to the speed of things, how the whole of sciences was seen through logical positivism or logical empiricism. So it's the period between 1925 to 1935. So this is very important to see the period in which logical empiricism, logical positivism, developments in general theory of relativity as a sequence of those developments, how Einstein saw it, how Einstein tried to embed things, how Einstein's equivalence principle is basically an evolving framework to just make sense to all frames of reference, relative reference frames. How can see things rather in the absolutizing things. So it's a more an evolving framework in that sense. But the point is, the years 1925 to 35, it is the time in which Iqbal wrote Reconstruction. So maybe Iqbal was not maybe entirely, when he says here in the book, he says he's not first the philosophical value of theory. First, it destroys not the objectivity of nature, but view of substances. So here, I believe that ultimate character of reality is spiritual. This is his belief system. But in order to avoid Einstein theory, which is a scientific theory, deals only with the structure of things, throws no light on the ultimate nature of things which possesses that structure. So empiricism as a philosophy, Einstein, Reichenbach, positivists, they take empiricism as prior. They don't have metaphysics of empiricism. Empiricism is a la empiricism. Being empiricism is a be all as a philosophy in that sense. So here Iqbal is not comfortable with that, and he is also not comfortable with the inevitable, the causal order which relativity seems to. So causal order, you can say here maybe Einstein and Whitehead have disagreements. This whether inevitability of that cosmic order can be what I should say interpreted from that thing, or it can be inferred from Einsteinian thing, the causal order, whether it can be seen to be necessarily inferred from Einsteinian thing, the cosmic now in that sense. For example, if the simultaneity, relative simultaneity is, you cannot have a given point in space, two people may register that event according to their position in space. So for the two observers, their notion of past, present, and future may vary. So which Iqbal is also trying to struggle with his own self when he's trying to say that Kantian seriality, Kantian notion of possession associated with time has some problems. So he's trying to struggle with this idea and basically being on defense, but his intuition may be right. His intuition is he has an intuition of a philosopher or a poet, or his metaphysical belief system, where he finds either empiricism as a philosophy or a geometrical empiricism, by which we have arrived at general theory of relativity. There is so whether it's all encompassing or not, or something more can be something more can be added to it, or it can be embedded in the larger episteme of what I should say Akbarian thing, the unity of being, God as a creator or not. So you can yes. So Einstein recognized the factually dictated need to abandon the customary definition of congruence, which had yielded a Euclidean description of classically assumed facts. So customary definition of congruence can be set in way we can understand Euclidean geometry, but you can we can suspend that judgment. So Poincare took a stand in opposition to the kind of qualified metrical empiricism which is espoused by writers such as Reichenbach. Yes, and Carnap seems to be uh, so you can say in the whichever way we took it. So if you just take a passage from Henry Poincare in his Science and Hypothesis, where he says whichever way we look at it, it's impossible to discover geometric empiricism in the rational meaning. Carnap and Reichenbach's hardly provide a stimulus to target Poincare's polemic. Instead, the dominant philosophical interpretations of geometry were such a prioristic uh, neo-Kantian ones as that of Carnap, Russell, and one of Kant. So the point is that like maybe there's a good argumentation given by this Grunbaum in this book Philosophy of Space and Time, where he has just discussed threadbare the notions of space and time from Newton to Poincare to Einstein, Eddington, Brigman, Carnap, Reichenbach, Whitehead, Russell, and so many the things, and his own viewpoint also in some sense here and there with his observations. And for example, where once he says that our concerns as well as Einstein's merely to single out a particular congruence class, what has been called as rule of correspondence. Internal consistency of several non-Euclidean geometries hardly seems to establish the logical promise of Euclidean geometry as the sole guarantor of consistency. Be Gaussian curvature in two space or Riemannian. So means we cannot embed, and we have not necessarily to embed things in the Euclidean space primarily. So what does it mean? So if there is a alternative freedom to do a lot of things, so if it's not mere conventionality, because once we talk of Poincare's conventionality, it's the logic of conventionality, maybe even if it springs from freedom or it springs from our needs decided by lab or experiments to satisfy a certain thing, but that objective belief in truth is somehow being in some sense you can say that objective belief is somehow under stress, under that you feel compromised. So the Catholicity of logical empiricists of empricizing geometry, you can see they may not entirely agree to this viewpoint. So from this, how can we see foundations of space-time theories in some fundamental sense, where we are concerned with the physicalization of geometrical structure, to view geometrical structure of space and space-time as an object of empirical investigation. So since Einstein was himself influenced by empirical philosophy and logical positivists, we can say that these resulted as central sources to support his philosophical views. So you can now I'm coming to the thing that so if Reichenbach says that we can have uniquely we can claims that in a given metric uniquely determines a congruence class which can be appropriate to it, not that of the argumentation of Poincare that it's the congruence class can be developed according to the convenience. So if the Catholicity of logical empiricism as a philosophy in which you can embed a general theory of relativity. Can we have a critique of maybe philosophy of geometry in that, or can we have a critique of Einstein's wholesome lock, stock, and barrel, taking this the notion of empricizing geometry in that sense? Can we critique it? For example, but it may, so any statement can be made true, whatever the case. So if we make means drastic adjustment elsewhere in the system. So here the thing is that so we just wait. There's for some time. Just we'll have some break for 1-2 minutes, then we can continue. Yes. So maybe you can yes. So can we have a critique of Einstein in theory of geometry, where we can say the empricizing geometrical constructs in that sense. So we can say the conventionality of congruence to carry out rematerization is not at all peculiar to Poincare. Yes. We can have now what I should say, these so the question more or less which arises that so to what extent does rationality they actually realize Einstein's philosophical motivations? And so you can say so if we talk of foundations of space-time theories, we can say that developments in the relativity appear to lead what one might call as physicalization of geometrical structure, to the geometrical structure of space and space-time as an empirical investigation is just the same way, the way we just see the world, the planets, the atoms, the molecules. So the empirical bias or the empirical philosophy and the logical positives use both this fact and theories that resulted as a central source of support to their philosophical views. So to what extent do these Einsteinian theory of relativity explain, help us in these doctrines of empirical philosophy in that sense, or empricizing things, or it's the other way around. The empricizing things has helped us in the coming up to the general theory of relativity. The success being mainly when we talk of success of general theory of relativity, it's basically the observational aspects, the famous expedition, the perihelion of Mercury, the so many other predictions which can be seen in that way. So the concern is mainly what can be seen there. So Einstein is so here it smacks of sort of opportunism, or you can say pragmatism in some clever sense, where Einstein is merely singling out a particular congruence class, what has been called as rule of correspondence, and internal. So you can say, so this is a point where you can say what is the what reason apart from the ulterior needs of empirical experiment theory agreeing to the experiment, is there an a priori theoretical or a reason to choosing a particular congruence class? This is a fundamental question in that sense, which Einstein fails to answer in some sense. Maybe I'll just say what he tries to say, his viewpoint. Both earlier neo-Kantian positivists and later empiricists positivists saw development of relativity through as progressive elimination of more and more aspects of theoretical structure. Maybe this disease, I would say, it has continued up to this time, to see things only empirically, to see things only in empricizing things, to see everything in terms of experimental parameters. So this means empiricism as a philosophy has won in that sense. So you conveniently shrug off this question: why should we take the particular congruence class of geometries, which will be helpful in explaining the empirical phenomena in some convenient way in that sense? And maybe it will lead to some other issues of power, how we define power, that certain theory helps us you to just equip you in some the relationships of science, philosophy, science, and technology. Whether general relativity helps in some, it has a promise in future of controlling matter or controlling the things in the classical sense. So the classical bias is still continuing in general theory of relativity. Maybe not in the way we have formulated quantum mechanics, the way we have formulated the philosophical aspects of space and time and general relativity. The classical empirical bias is continuing in that sense. So general theory of relativity uses a perfectly deterministic and objective spatial and spatial temporal geometry. So so here maybe I shall be try to come to the end part of it, where we have continued with the last part of it. So maybe even though compared to the conventionalism of Poincare, the general relativity we use, it's morely taken as a perfectly deterministic system with an objective and spatio-temporal geometry. Maybe the indistinguishability arguments do not have the same method. Maybe the input of spatial theory of relativity and equivalence principle is there. And equivalence principle is also a sort of evolving framework in that sense. It's how you cannot maybe you have to just equivalence of different frames of reference in that sense. Uh, uh, Now I'm coming to the end, very important point of it, where I want to focus on this thing, and I'll come link it with Iqbal. So I am taking a quote from Paul Feyerabend, his famous book Against Method. In the start, he says, so here it's more the philosophy of space and time, which is an empricized, the radical empiricism of Kant, not that. The empiricism, which is seen that different geometries can be equally consistent, and they can help us in understanding some phenomena. Maybe I have also not talked of maybe phenomena of optics or optometry, the arguments of Helmholtz and Poincare in why how the eye as an instrument, how it measures. So if the space, so the arguments that physics will define the geometry, not the other way around in that sense. So the question is the free choice. So what's the methodology which works? Is it that whatever works, it works? It's something random, means the choice of congruence class depends upon suitability. So which logical empiricists or logical positivists want to do away with by the fact that they want to embed geometry, general relativity, and in that context they want to still say that science is objective, and clothing general relativity as a perfectly deterministic theory with objective spatial and temporal geometry. So this is the point. So or it speaks of the state of affairs fundamentally. So here I'm quoting Paul Feyerabend in his book Against Method, where he says it's not clear that the successful participation in a process of this kind is possible only for ruthless opportunists who is not tied to any particular philosophy and who adopts whatever procedure seems to fit the occasion. That's it. So the respectability which we give to procedures of science are basically a sort of consensus of logical empiricism or logical positivism, and trying to see general relativity. Whether Einstein made it possible, or whether the force of the school, the other school, was so much that Einstein was forced to move in this direction, the jury can be out. So here, maybe another quote from Lenin. This is what Feyerabend says: in order to fulfill the task of revolutionary task, the revolutionary class must apply not only one particular methodology, but any methodology. So not one congruence class, any congruence class which fits the empiricism. So why should we have faith in empiricism or what we see through senses? So it again comes to the older debates. So I'll quote here, quoting Einstein. Einstein says the external conditions under which scientists, which are set for scientists by the facts of experience, do not present him to let himself be too much restricted in the construction of his conceptual world by adherence to an epistemological system. He therefore must appear to the systematic epistemologist as a type of unscrupulous opportunists. So this is all, says it all. So Einstein is himself being, I'll not say he was a physicist, philosopher, he was that purist in that sense, but he is trying to appreciate, he is trying to have inkling of this hodgepodge method, or whatever works, it is right or it is true. So it may not be satisfying, in his own words, to the unsystematic epistemologist. But if I go to Einstein's personal, what I should say, discovery, it will also speak. For example, Einstein's, maybe people say special theory of relativity. Without if Einstein would not have been there, other people would have discovered it. In case of general relativity, people say that he was unique in that sense. But here I want to contest it in that sense that if you read Einstein-Besso or Einstein-Hilbert, that history, now people, a lot. So Einstein was more as a unscrupulous opportunist. He was trying to be ahead in that empirical thing. What is best suitable for experimentation? So if his theory suits that experiment, so he's trying to choose. He's making a choice in an unscrupulous, in an opportunistic way, in that sense. And that has continued up to this time also, maybe. So much has been modern day science by saying that everything we discover, it has been predicted by Einstein. So it's all, the disease has continued up to this time. It's not basically Einstein. Einstein is himself an unconscious, maybe semi-conscious follower of a method, an empirical method of these logical empiricists or these logical positivists, of these Kantian, post-Kantian, mellowed down Kantian radical empiricism, which was followed in science by Mach, Mill, Hume, and maybe in sciences, Helmholtz and other things. So under this all thing, what I'm trying to say, Iqbal is uncomfortable and fighting this worldview, which somehow he's not comfortable with. He's not able to articulate an alternate theory, but his comfort, he's at least disagreeing, he's finding some discomfort in that sense. And if I'll just use a couple of words, that on the way after 1950s, people, sciences has developed, it may be in another lecture, maybe, how the proliferation of theories, post-Einsteinian, and they basically discount philosophy in that sense. The role of mathematics, role of physics, role of sciences. So empiricism, the role of empiricism has continued up to this time also. So it will be a great service if we can see fundamentally the epistemic foundations of modern day sciences, and the catholicity of empirical way of looking at things at the expense of maybe the traditional schools which we are having. So here I'll sort of end this lecture in that sense, that so how I'll just end it. So I'll end at this very sentence of Iqbal, which I find very Einstein theory, which as a scientific theory deals only with the structure of things, throws no light on the ultimate nature of things which possess that structure. Means the ontic, the purposive part of it, yes, the being, the universe is self-conscious in itself or not. What is it? I'll stop at it. So maybe you might have liked it or disliked it or been into whatever. So this is the way I have tried to articulate today's lecture. Thanks for listening.